The more you say, the less powerful you become. It feels like the opposite should be true. You've been taught that the articulate one, the one with all the words, the one who can explain everything and fill every silence, is the impressive one. So in the important moments, the ones where you want to be taken seriously, you talk more. You explain, you elaborate, you make your case at length, certain that all those words are building your authority. And they're doing the exact reverse. Every extra word you say gives a little more of yourself away, dilutes your point, and quietly lowers your standing in the room. The people with real power learned this long ago. They say less, and by saying less, they seem to hold more. This is Law 4 of power. Always say less than necessary. And there is no better teacher of it than a queen who ruled one of the most dangerous courts in history for 44 years, largely by refusing to give anyone a straight answer. By the end of this, you're going to understand why the person who talks the most is rarely the most powerful, why silence forces others to reveal themselves, and how to make your few words carry the weight of many. Let me show you this in your own life, because you feel it constantly, even if you've never named it. Think of the last time you were nervous and you started talking too much. Over-explaining a decision, filling an awkward silence with nervous chatter, answering a simple question with a long, winding justification. And you could feel it happening. Feel yourself getting smaller with each extra word. Feel the other person's attention drifting, and yet you couldn't stop. Now think of the opposite. Think of someone you find genuinely commanding, someone whose presence fills a room. Do they chatter? No, they speak rarely and briefly, and when they do, everyone leans in. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's gravity, right? You know both of these people, and one of them is often you. And here's the strange truth underneath it. The commanding person is usually not smarter than the chatterer, and often has less to prove. They have simply learned the one discipline the nervous talker hasn't, which is to stop. To make the point and let it land. To let a silence do its work, instead of panicking and burying the point under 10 more sentences. It is not a talent you're born with. It is a habit you build, one held tongue at a time. And the wonderful part is that you can start building it in your very next conversation, because the skill is not learning what to say. It is learning when to stop. Comment the word chatter if you've ever felt your own power drain away as you talk too much, filling a silence you should have just let sit. I want to see how common this is, because nervous over-talking undoes more people than almost anything, and by the end of this you'll know how to stop. Let me show you the law, and then the queen who mastered it. First, the law itself, plainly, Law 4, always say less than necessary. When you are trying to impress people, when the moment matters, when power is in play, the instinct is to say more. Resist it, say less, be brief, be a little vague where vagueness serves you, leave things unsaid, because the fewer words you use, the more weight each one carries, and the more powerful and enigmatic you appear. And I know the objection already, because I feel it too. Isn't this just being cold, evasive? Isn't openness a virtue? Stay with me, because the answer is more subtle than yes or no, and we'll get to exactly when this applies and when it doesn't. But the core truth underneath the law is simple and a little uncomfortable. When you say too much, you give too much away. You reveal your thoughts, your intentions, your insecurities, your whole hand. And once people can see your whole hand, they have power over you. The person who says less keeps their cards face down, stays impossible to fully read, and forces everyone else to guess. And in almost every room, the one who is guessed at holds more power than the one who is figured out. And notice the specific trap that pulls us into saying too much. It is almost always anxiety. When we feel unsure, unproven, or slightly threatened, we talk more. Because talking feels like doing something, feels like filling the dangerous silence, feels like proving we belong. But that extra talking, born of anxiety, broadcasts the very anxiety it was trying to hide. The room can feel it, the over-explanation, the nervous elaboration, the rush to justify. All of it quietly signals, I am not sure of myself. Whereas the person who can make one calm, brief statement and then simply stop is signaling the opposite, a total unbothered certainty. You do not have to feel certain to do this, you just have to stop talking sooner, and the stopping itself will start to make you feel, and seem, more certain. Comment the word, over-explained, if you can already think of a moment you talked far too much, and watched your own point dissolve under the weight of your extra words. So, England, the middle of the 1500s. A young woman named Elizabeth comes to the throne, and by every calculation of the time, she should not survive it. She is surrounded by enemies. Foreign powers want to control her. Her own councilors want to manage her, and every faction in a violently divided country is desperate to know one thing above all. Which side is she on? Whom will she marry? What does she truly believe? The entire court holds its breath, waiting for her to declare herself, to commit, to answer. And here is the genius that would keep her on the throne for 44 years. She refused to answer, not once, not twice, but for decades, on the enormous question of marriage, which every ruler around her treated as urgent. She became a master of the endless maybe. She entertained suitors from across Europe, kept negotiations alive for years, allowed everyone to believe they might be the one, and committed to no one. She used the mere possibility of her marriage as a diplomatic tool, dangling it before foreign powers to keep them friendly, and then quietly letting it dissolve, again and again, for her entire reign. She said less than necessary, always, and in that vast unsaid space, she kept every rival guessing and every option open. Her councilors were often maddened by it. They wanted decisions, commitments, clear answers. They saw her reticence as indecision, even as a weakness, a woman who could not make up her mind. They pushed her constantly to declare herself, to name a husband, to settle the question of who would follow her. And she gave them, over and over, the same masterful non-answer. Words that sounded like a reply, but committed to nothing. She would thank them, acknowledge the question, speak beautifully around it, and leave the room, having promised absolutely nothing. She turned saying less than necessary into a fine art, and it drove the most powerful men in England to despair, precisely because they could never get a grip on her. And think about the position she was actually in, because it makes the achievement staggering. She was a woman ruling alone in an age that believed a woman could not rule at all. Every man around her assumed she needed a husband to govern for her, a foreign alliance to protect her, a firm declaration to legitimize her. The pressure to commit, to hand her power to a man, to pin herself down, was relentless and came from every direction. And her single greatest tool against all of it was the unanswered question. As long as she never said yes to a marriage, she remained the sole holder of her own power. As long as she never declared a firm side, no faction could own her, and no rival could fully counter her. Her silence was not the absence of a move, it was the move. Every unanswered question was a small act of keeping her crown entirely her own. Comment the word guessing if you're starting to see it. How the person who stays a little unreadable holds a strange power over everyone, forced to guess what they'll do. Now here is the part that turns this from a story about a cunning queen into something much deeper, the thing her frustrated councilors never understood. They thought her silence was weakness, indecision, a failure to lead. They were completely wrong. Her refusal to commit was not the absence of a strategy. It was the strategy, the most sophisticated one at the entire court, and it did something far greater than keep her personally in power. Consider what was happening across the water at the time. Europe was tearing itself apart over religion. Neighboring countries were descending into savage civil wars, neighbor slaughtering neighbor, over which version of faith would rule. It was one of the bloodiest periods in the continent's history, and the fuse in every case was the same. Rulers forcing everyone to declare, publicly and absolutely, exactly what they believed, and then punishing everyone who declared wrong. And here is what Elizabeth did instead, and it is the deepest application of this law you will ever see. On the most explosive question of her age, the question of private religious belief, she deliberately said less than necessary. She built a broad, deliberately vague middle path, and she famously refused to interrogate her people's private faith. She would not, in her own paraphrased words, make windows into men's souls. She declined to force the declarations that were causing bloodbaths everywhere else. By saying less, by leaving the most dangerous questions strategically unanswered, she kept a fractured, furious country from exploding the way its neighbors did. Her reticence was not weakness, it was mercy, and it was genius, and it very likely saved thousands of lives. Think about how much restraint that took, and how counterintuitive it was. Every instinct of power in that age screamed the opposite. Make them declare. Make them prove their loyalty. Root out the ones who believe wrong. That was how her neighbors ruled. And it drowned their countries in blood. Elizabeth looked at the same pressure, the same demand to force the question, and she did the far harder thing. She left it open. She let people keep their private beliefs, private, unexamined, unforced, and she absorbed the constant criticism that this made her weak, wishy-washy, insufficiently committed to the true faith. She took that criticism for decades rather than light the fuse. It is one of the most underrated acts of leadership in history, and its whole method was simply refusing to say the words everyone was demanding she say. Sit with that, because it changes what this law even means. Saying less than necessary is not just a trick to seem powerful. At its highest, it is the wisdom to know that not every question needs a final answer, that forcing everyone to declare and commit and take a hard side is often what turns disagreement into catastrophe. Sometimes the most powerful and the most humane thing a person can do is leave the dangerous thing unsaid and let the peace hold. Comment the word unsaid if you've ever seen a situation blow up, precisely because someone said the one thing that should have been left unspoken. So let's understand why saying less works so powerfully on other people, because once you see the mechanism, you'll wield it carefully. The first thing is this: silence makes other people deeply uncomfortable, and to escape that discomfort, they will fill it, and in filling it, they reveal themselves. Watch what happens when you ask a question and then simply stay quiet. The other person answers, and then when you don't immediately respond, the silence stretches, and they grow uneasy, and to relieve the tension they keep talking. And in that extra, unprompted talking, they tell you what they really think, what they're worried about, what they're willing to give. Skilled negotiators know this. Skilled questioners of every kind know this. The one who can sit calmly in a silence controls the conversation, because the other person will almost always break first and reveal something they meant to keep. Comment the word broke if you've ever watched someone crack under a silence and blurt out the exact thing they were trying to hide. Because once you have seen it happen, you can never unsee how much power lives in a held pause. The second thing is about weight. Words are like currency. The more you print, the less each one is worth. The person who talks constantly has cheapened their every word, so that nothing they say lands with any force. But the person who speaks rarely has kept their words rare and therefore valuable, so that when they finally do speak, everyone listens, because they've learned that this person only speaks when it matters. Brevity is not just efficient, It is a way of making your words precious, and precious words carry a weight that a flood of chatter never can. And the third thing is the strangest. When you say less, people fill the silence with their own imagination, and they almost always fill it in your favor. The person who explains everything is known, and therefore ordinary. But the person who leaves things unsaid becomes a kind of screen onto which others project depth, mystery, hidden wisdom. We assume the quiet one is thinking profound thoughts. We assume the one who withholds must have reasons. Often they simply said less, and let our own minds do the flattering work of making them seem deeper than a talker ever could. You can watch this happen in any group. There is always someone who says very little, and somehow by the end, everyone treats their rare comment as the wisest thing said. Were they actually the wisest person in the room? Maybe, maybe not. But by speaking rarely, they let everyone else fill the silence around them with assumed depth. Meanwhile, the person who talked the most, who shared every thought, who explained at length, is remembered as tiring, or shallow, or too much, no matter how good their ideas actually were. It is deeply unfair, and it is completely real. The quantity of your words shapes how your quality is judged, and more words almost always means a lower verdict. Now here is where I have to challenge something. Because taken wrong, this law would make your whole life colder, and that is not the point. You were raised to believe that being open, articulate, and forthcoming is always good, and that being reserved or brief is somehow cold, evasive, or even rude. And in the right relationships, openness truly is a gift. But applied everywhere, indiscriminately, the belief that you must always explain fully, always fill the silence, always say everything on your mind, is not a virtue. It is a leak. It drains your power, exposes you to people who haven't earned your openness, and buries your good points under a pile of unnecessary words. Not every person has earned your full transparency, and not every silence needs your voice to fill it. So the real law is not never speak, and it is certainly not be cold with the people you love. With them, share freely. That closeness is the whole point of having them. The real law is about discernment and about quality over quantity. In the charged rooms, the negotiations, the conflicts, the moments with people who might use your words against you, say less. And everywhere, always, aim for words that are few and well chosen rather than many and loose. This is not about becoming silent and withholding. It is about no longer weakening yourself with nervous overtalk, no longer giving your whole hand to people who haven't earned it, and learning that a few precise words, delivered with calm, outweigh 100 anxious ones every single time. You are not muting yourself, you are concentrating yourself. And here is a test you can use to know which mode you're in, because it keeps you from turning cold with the wrong people. Ask yourself, is this a person I am building closeness with, or a situation where power is in play? With the first, openness is the gift, so give it. With the second, brevity is the shield, so use it. Most people get this exactly backwards. They pour their hearts out to colleagues and rivals who will use it, and then go quiet and guarded with the partners and friends who only wanted to be let in. Flip that. Be an open book to the few who have earned it, and a closed one to the rooms where your words are ammunition. That single distinction will protect both your power and your relationships at the same time. Comment about the one person you can always be fully open with, the one where saying everything is safe and good. Because the freedom in this law is knowing exactly where to hold back and exactly where you never need to. So let's make this practical, something you can use this week. Here's the move. In your next slightly charged conversation, a negotiation, a disagreement, a moment where you feel the nervous urge to over-explain, try the discipline of the single breath. Say your point, simply and briefly, and then stop. Don't rush to fill the silence that follows. Let it sit. It will feel uncomfortable, almost unbearable for about 3 seconds. Hold it anyway, and watch what happens. Watch the other person move to fill it, and often reveal something. Watch how your brief, unhurried point lands with more weight than a long one would have. The whole skill lives in that one held breath, the refusal to keep talking past the moment your point was made. And build a second habit alongside it. Before you speak in an important moment, ask yourself one quick question. What is the fewest words that say this well? Then say those, and only those, not the rambling version, not the over-justified version, the concentrated one. At first, feel like you're saying too little. That feeling is just the old nervous habit protesting. Push through it, and you'll discover that the concentrated version almost always lands harder. So here's your job this week. One charged conversation. Make your point briefly, then hold the silence for 3 full seconds instead of filling it. Just once, and notice the shift in the room, because that single held silence will teach you more about power than any words ever could. Comment the word silence if you're going to try it. If you're going to make your point once and then hold the pause for 3 full seconds this week. Saying it here makes it real, and it turns a nice idea into something you'll actually do when the moment comes. And now the deepest layer, the one that turns this from a tactic into a way of carrying yourself. There is a quiet, unmistakable authority in the person who does not need to fill every silence. Most people talk from anxiety, to prove themselves, to be liked, to escape the discomfort of a pause. The person who has made peace with silence, who can let a moment sit without rushing to fill it, radiates a self-possession that words can never fake. They seem grounded, unhurried, in control, because they are not being driven by the nervous need to perform. And that calm, that comfort with saying less, is one of the most magnetic and powerful qualities a person can have. This is what Elizabeth understood in her bones. Her power was never in what she said. It was in what she chose to leave unsaid, and in her total, unshakable comfort with leaving people waiting for an answer that might never come. She let the silence be hers, and you can build a smaller, everyday version of that same authority, simply by breaking the habit of anxious overtalk, by making your words fewer and truer, and by learning to sit, calm and unbothered, in the silences that make everyone else scramble. The person who owns the silence owns the room. And notice the strange thing that happens to how people treat you once you do this. When you stop filling every silence, stop over-explaining, stop rushing to prove yourself with words, people start to lean towards you instead of away. They listen harder when you do speak, because they've learned your words are worth catching. They grant you a respect they never gave you when you were talking twice as much. Have you noticed that the people whose approval you most wanted were rarely won over by your best explanations? It is almost never the flood of words that earns real respect. It is the calm, the restraint, the sense that here is a person who does not need to perform. You cannot talk your way into that kind of standing. You can only quietly stop over-talking your way out of it. So, Elizabeth, let me bring it home. She reigned for 44 years, one of the longest and most stable reigns in her country's history, and she did it as a woman alone, in a world of powerful men who spent decades trying and failing to pin her down, to make her commit, to get a straight answer out of her. She outlasted them all. She kept her throne, kept her options, and kept her fractured country largely at peace. And she did it not through grand declarations, but through the disciplined, lifelong art of saying less than necessary. When she died, the men who had been so frustrated by her silence finally understood what they had been dealing with. Not an indecisive woman, the most controlled strategic mind of the age, who had simply refused, for 44 years, to give anyone the words they could have used against her. So here's what I want you to take from Law 4. Not that you should become guarded and cold with everyone, but that in the moments that matter, your words are power, and every unnecessary one you speak is power spent for nothing. That the nervous urge to over-explain, to fill the silence, to give your whole hand, is the enemy of your standing in almost every room. Say less, choose your few words well, learn to sit calmly in a silence while everyone else scrambles to fill it. And discover, as Elizabeth did, that the person who says less than necessary is very often the most powerful person in the room, precisely because no one can ever quite figure them out. And remember the deepest lesson of her reign, the one that lifts this above a mere power trick. Saying less is not only how you protect yourself, it is sometimes how you protect everyone around you. The unsaid word that prevents a fight, the declaration you refuse to force, the dangerous question you have the wisdom to leave open. Elizabeth held her tongue for 44 years and kept a whole country from the fire that consumed its neighbors. Your silences will never carry a kingdom, but in your own life, in your own rooms, the thing you choose not to say may be the most powerful and the kindest thing you ever do. Tell me the one conversation where you're going to say less this week. One word or a few in the comments, and I read them. The negotiation, the argument, the moment you always talk too much and regret it. Mine, for years, was almost every important meeting, because I thought saying more proved I belonged there, when it did the exact opposite. Now I say less and mean more. What's yours? Put it down below. And this was Law 4 of 48. Each law in this series is one more piece of the map, one more way to read the game and hold your own in it. The next one is on the screen now. I'll see you there.